Hey, it's Russ from Pro Tools Expert. We're down at James's studio. This time we've got hold of the UA Apollo with Thunderbolt option, and we want to do the same test we did before using the Avid HD Thunderbolt option. We're going to go and track some stuff. We're going to try and break it. We're going to see how many tracks we can get before it falls over. Let's go in and see how we get on.
So here we are in the studio, and what I've done is I've hooked up the Apollo via Thunderbolt to my MacBook Pro. And I've got open the Pro Tools session, but I've also got the UA console open. And what this allows us to do is sort out all our direct input monitoring. Now, the Apollo has two separate headphone outputs, and the nice thing about it is you can actually assign them separately, either giving them the monitoring output or the monitor source from Pro Tools, or you can actually assign them individually. And then when you go into Pro Tools, if I flick over into Pro Tools there, you can see I'm able to set them up as an individual output. So you've got 8 line outputs and the ADAT outputs, but you've also got 2 completely dedicated headphone outputs, which is really handy in this kind of environment. So what I've done, let's go back over into the console again, is I've set up the gains for my 4 preamps that are built into the Apollo, and in this case we're using a kick drum inside, kick drum outside, and my 2 overheads. Then my lines, the 4 line inputs, are coming from the UA 4710D Twinfinity preamp, which is over in the rack. And they're set up as snare top, snare bottom, my kind of dynamic compression microphone, it's just room mic, and my ride cymbal mic. And then via the ADAT optical inputs, I'm using the first 4 of the Audient ASP008. So hi-hat, tom 1, tom 2, and tom 3. So that's giving us 12 channels of recording simultaneously. So what we'll do now is we will set up the monitoring section, so the zero latency monitoring section with some plugins. So when I play back on drums, we can get some really nice sound. So you actually record and track with the plugins.
So here we are, we have got everything set up. We've just done a sound check with his drums. Now, one of the things I've done is I put a couple of 1176 compressors across the snare just to level them a bit. And now there's a cool thing you can do. You can have insert effects on the console application where you can either monitor them and we can just use it for monitoring, or we can record that to the tracks, which is really cool. We've got monitor settings as well from the console application into James's ears in there. So he's hearing something completely different in the mix than I'm hearing in here. So we are ready to record. So I'm just going to press record into Pro Tools, and away we go. Ready when you are, James. So we got the drums down, and now we're going to put down a bass guitar. Just to let you know, we've got his bass guitar going through the 11 rack, then coming into the Universal Audio 710D, 4710D preamps that we showed you earlier. What I've also got as well is when it comes into the Universal console application, I'm going through the 4K channel strip and the DBX 160 just to give it some more shape and color. And I'm actually going to track this time, record it with those insert effects in when we track it, which will be really cool and just give us some really nice shape to the sound. So let's get this bass guitar down, shall we? Okay, so we've got the bass down now. One thing I want to point out, actually, before we go any further with this test that we're doing, this kind of shootout, is that if you go into Setup and Playback Engine, it's running at 32 samples, but we don't need to run it at 32 samples because the load for the latency-free monitoring is actually being handled inside the box itself. So this box can give you latency-free monitoring, and you could still push your buffer size within Pro Tools to 1024 or whatever your machine will allow you to do, which often gives too much latency for tracking things like drums, keyboards, and guitars, or anything really. When you're that high, that's really set for mixing. So the cool thing is, although we're recording at 32 samples because we're doing an A-B comparison between this and the HD Thunderbolt box, the interesting thing is to know is you don't need to. Okay, so we're back now. We're going to track some electric guitar. We've got a Fender Strat. We're going into an 11 rack. We're then going from the 11 rack out into the 4710D preamp. Then we're coming into the Universal console application, forgive me, get my teeth back in, and this time we've decided to add some more fun to it. So we're adding a Roland Dimension D and a DBX 160. The DBX 160 is a must-have plugin. If you don't spend any more money than on any other plugin from Universal Audio, then get a DBX 160 because they are just my go-to now. I use them for everything. So we've got an electric guitar. Let's just hear that, James, for a moment. So that's what the Dimension D. You probably can't hear it down a mic. You'll hear it on the track. And the DBX is just really sort of slamming that a bit. So here we go. So let's track this, James, and let's go into record and try this out. I'm going to give you a click track so you can play in time. Okay, so we had so much fun putting the first guitar down. We're going to put a second guitar now. It's the same Strat. It's through the same gear. But what we've done as well is we've added the Cooper Time Cube and we've added the MXR flanger doubler to give you that kind of, and DBX 160. It's kind of Andy Summers sound now. If you just play that for me a second. That's nice, very nice. So we're just throwing a load of plugins at it just to see if it'll fall over. And so far we can't break it, which is what we're intending to try and do here. Is trying to see how long this will keep going before Pro Tools falls over. So the reason it's not falling over is the load has been taken by the box, which is really cool and really nice. So you can see why this got product of the year now, can't you? Anyway, let's record this guitar and we'll see in a while. So James has finished putting stuff down. So we've tracked drums, we've tracked bass, we've tracked 2 guitars, and Pro Tools isn't even sniffing at this at 32 samples. And of course, that's partly due as well to the all this load being taken by this box. What's also really cool as well is now we've stopped using the monitor application for tracking. We can use the UAD cards that are in this actually for mixing as well. So we can now use the power of this in our mix application because we've tracked some of it anyway. It's gone down to tape, as we used to say. It's gone down to the tracks, so we can now use this as a standard Apollo box for monitoring and for doing all our mixing, which is really, really cool. So the final test we're going to do now is we're going to put a load of tracks on and see if we can jam smash it and see if it will fall over at 32 samples. So come back in a second and we'll be ready to do that test.
Okay, so let me just run the numbers by you. We've got our 16 tracks that we recorded, drums, guitars and bass, and we've duplicated those 3 times to give us 64 tracks. And we've put all of those remaining tracks into record to see if we can break it. Let's turn the monitors down a little bit because this could sound horrific.
And let's see what happens. And in fact, let's get up the processing power as well, so people know. So there's the processing power as well, and let's get up as well, showing the playback settings as well in setup. So we've got a playback engine. As you can see, we'll just quickly zoom in on that. 32 samples on the playback engine. So. And
like Mike's suggestion, we've got our CPU is at 99%, but we're only using 7 of the 8 processors. Here we go. Let's see what happens.
Let's look at that processor power we're at it as well. Go. Oh, we are recording.
Yep.
It's not even sniffing, is it?
An average of 13%. Maybe the peaks are jumping up a little bit.
I think, while we're doing this, we may as well duplicate it again and go to 128 tracks and see if we can manage to break it.
Let's do it.
We did on Pro Tools with the HD native system. We got to 64. Should we stop here? I reckon everybody would want us to keep pushing it to see what happens.
Let's break it.
Let's try and break it anyway. So let's zoom out again. Do a quick duplication of all of those tracks. Just recorded, hasn't it? So what's the Mac we're on, James? Or we're just having this conversation for a minute?
This is in fact, let me just get the specs up on it. It's one of the new MacBook Pros, so it's the Retina display 15-inch, and I spec'd it as far as it would go. So 16 gig of RAM, 500 gig internal drive. It's worth noting at this point that we're not running our audio off the internal drive. It's a 500 gig internal SSD drive, but on the Apollo, you have this really neat feature. You can use the redundant, if you like, FireWire outputs, I/O, as connections for hard drives. So that's exactly what I've done. I'm using the Thunderbolt to FireWire converter in the Apollo, and I've attached a LaCie hard drive to the FireWire 800 port on the back of the Apollo. So we've duplicated our duplication. So we now have 128 tracks in Pro Tools. Now, agreed, the Apollo doesn't have 128 inputs, but it's worth seeing, if we can break it as it's hooked up to our Pro Tools system. So we're now running 128 tracks of Pro Tools. So
we're the first 16 we've already got recorded. So we're doing this as if we've got 16 tracks down, and then we're recording the rest of them live again now. 32 samples on a MacBook Air. So this is also a testimony, I think, to Pro Tools as well. Pro Tools 10. You could not have done this before 10. No way, I've got to.
Definitely not. I mean, Pro Tools would have given up the ghost a long time ago. So yeah.
Should we try it? We haven't done this. Let's go for it. Let's put it in record and see what happens.
Ready?
Yeah, fire.
Go. Let's actually go back to the beginning because that makes more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. Best place to record is at the beginning of a song.
Oh no, we're still there. Oh, it thought about it, but
and we won. How's the CPU doing there?
okay, it's averaging at about 20%, and it's peaking probably set towards 70, but still.
That's mad. So we're recording 128 tracks with the Apollo in James's studio.
So if anyone said to me before I got my HD rig, do you know what? You can record as many tracks with effectively a single U box and some preamps. I'd be like, yeah, maybe not. But actually, it's absolutely rock solid. I'm more than slightly impressed.
Okay then, so we came here to do the test that we did on the HD Thunderbolt box. To be fair, we didn't actually keep pushing it, but we were already falling over on the Avid one before. I think we can say that.
Yeah, I think we got to 64.
We got to 64, but it was still cooking. But it wasn't bad. It never gets 32 samples, so that wasn't bad. And it was a different box too.
Yeah.
But the Apollo, I think we can genuinely say, it still gets our product of the year. Now it's got the Thunderbolt option on it as well. We have just done some serious sort of recording on this, or had we had a huge 128-piece band.
Yeah, I mean, we've thrown quite a lot of toys at it, and it just kept throwing them back, which is great.
So I think thank you, Universal Audio, for giving us the ammo to reinforce our product of the year, which is the Apollo, and with Thunderbolt on it as well. It's rock solid. That's what we can say. It's rock solid. Yeah. It sounds great.
It sounds great. It's rock solid. The next thing I would love to try is when they bring out, if they haven't already brought out the firmware upgrade, which means you can hook two Apollos together to give you a higher input count.
And the good news as well, because now on 6.4, it's also Windows compatible as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I have some tip off that some new stuff coming at NAMM from Universal Audio as well. So who knows what other goodies are going to bring us? But they keep coming out with this great stuff. So thumbs up, Universal Audio. Big thumbs up from us. Product of the year, and deservedly so.